Protesters are also worse than these protesters in terms of acting back.
You guys are online.
Okay. Start in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. I think the topic that was announced is called, wait, let me get it. Silence in a Noisy World, the Virtue of Silence. So some of you might have come to hear something like really inspiring that will be very mystical, and you'll learn how to cultivate inner silence and how maybe to keep peace within yourself despite whatever is going on around in the world without you. But I'm not going to talk about that, not because I don't like those like spiritual topics. I just always shy away from them because I know that like unless you are practicing what you're teaching, you shouldn't be really teaching it. So that's why I often stick to the very like history, dogmatic rites, all that stuff. So what we'll do instead, people told me to just keep silence for half an hour, but that's not gonna pass. So instead what we'll do, we'll have like a bunch of quotes from the Desert Fathers about silence. And then I want to hear what you guys like get out, learn from this. And yeah, we'll take it from there. So first quote from Abba Bowman or Abba Piman. He says, if you are silent, you will have peace wherever you live. Any comments? Very obvious. I think, so I put that one first because that's probably more in line of what you guys were thinking this talk would be about. And it's a very like simple message. I think some of the later fathers would speak more about this in depth. The Greek fathers would speak about Hezykasm, which is like, which the word means stillness or silence. And they spent a lot of their time trying to get this peace, this silence, this stillness within themselves. And it like it's self-explanatory. If you are silent, if you're not speaking, you're not saying your opinion, you're not going to cause conflict, you can pretty much go anywhere and you're not going to cause any trouble. You just remain neutral. Another very simple quote from the Desert Fathers. So Abba Joseph said to Abba Nesterius, what should I do about my tongue, for I cannot control it? So the old man said to him, when you speak, do you find peace? Some translations say, or relief? He replied, no. The old man said, if you do not find peace, why do you speak? Be silent, and when a conversation takes place, it is better to listen than to speak. What do you guys think of that one? I want comments.
Second quote is clearly talking about like physical silence, talking, but the first quote I thought it's more like silence of the heart. Especially when you say you'll have peace wherever you live, because I could be in a really, area that has lots of turmoils and it's not really peaceful at all. So even if I remain silent and not talking, still like a lot of action is happening around me. But like if I'm silent in my heart, it's not really how what's happening around me is going to give me peace, but how I interact with it. So if I'm silent from the inside towards, I guess, the outside, then I will have peace. But I think the second one's definitely talking about like
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah. So I'm gonna focus more on that second aspect of like actually just not talking. I like that second one. It's very simple, but it's also very frustrating because it's easier said than done. He just tells him, you know, if you're not gonna get relief from talking, then just don't talk. I don't know. I think that's kind of difficult. So difficult. Saint James writes in his epistle, if anyone does not stumble in word, he is a perfect man, able to also bridle the whole body. He says, for every kind of beast and bird of reptile and creature of the sea is tamed and has been tamed by man. But no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison. So St. James is saying, you know, I think he's agreeing with me. This is not an easy thing to do. You can't just stop talking. It's very difficult. But the Desert Fathers didn't give up on it. They still tried to keep silence. Probably the most famous quote about this, St. Arsenius, when he says, I have often regretted the words I have spoken, but I have never regretted my silence. What do we learn from that? I think Saint Arsenius is trying to deal with sin in a way. So Apapomen said, if we remember that it is written, by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned, we would choose to remain silent. So what he's quoting here is the gospel, right? And what people, like commentators, often point out, that Christ didn't say, you know, you'll be condemned for saying bad words or evil words or mean words. You'll be condemned for any idle words. And what's crazy is that, like, Apapomen or the Desert Fathers in general don't read this and say, oh, this is like a really nice teaching, like how it's beautiful and I like to contemplate about it. And no, they actually took it and said, how can we like practice this? How can we live this? And his solution was to remain silent. So Apapomen said to remain silent. Next thing we can learn from silence, from Proverbs, we say, even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. I think that is so true. So maybe the third thing we can learn is humility from silence. There's a story in the life of Antony by St. Athanasius. He says, one day some old man came to see Abba Antony. In the midst of them was Abba Joseph. Wanting to test them, the old man suggested a text from the scriptures, and beginning with the youngest, he asked them what it meant. Each gave his opinion as he was able, but to each one the old man said, you have not understood it. Last of all, he said to Abba Joseph, how do you explain this saying? And he replied, I do not know. Then Abba Antony said, indeed, Abba Joseph has found a way, for he has said, I do not know. So Saint Anthony's teaching is, you know, even if if you don't know something, don't say it, obviously, but maybe he's going even further. Even if you do know something, it's not necessary for you to say it, because you can learn from others instead. This one always like bothers me, because this is like the complete opposite of what we're taught to do at school or at work or whatever. We're taught that even if you don't know the answer, you should give any answer because you could get partial marks. And at work, even if you don't know what you're talking about, just start talking and then get the conversation going, and hopefully like it'll help things, and people will think you're involved and and they'll be impressed, you know. So first thing we said peace. Then we said some have learned, so some have gained peace from it, some have gained avoiding sins from it, and some have gained humility from it. Then this story that stands out to me the most in the paradise, it says, it was said of Abba Arathon that for 3 years he lived with a stone in his mouth until he learned to keep silence. What do you guys think about that one? I hope you're paying attention. Obviously, don't do this, or unless your father of confession tells you to do this, but I don't know. Maybe you should change your father of confession. I don't know if I'm like impressed about, you know, Abba Rathon's zeal for gaining silence, or I'm also like worried that he is a bit of an extremist. He's trying to compete with the other fathers who were silent, and his end goal has become silent. It hasn't become peace. It hasn't become avoiding sin. It hasn't become gaining humility. It's just about keeping silence. We see how that can be flipped around. So you see, for example, we could question peace. So there's a story of Saint Moses. It says this: another time, the fathers in Sketis wanted to test Moses. So they condemned him and said, "Why does this Ethiopian come among us?" Nevertheless, Moses remained quiet. Later, after the fathers had left, one monk asked him, "Abba Moses, were you not upset by that statement?" He replied, "Even if I was disturbed, I did not speak." This is one of those stories, like a lot of the stories of the Desert Fathers, it's not clear what is the teaching. The teaching could either be that Saint Moses is good because even when he is angry or he's upset, he filters what he says. Or maybe the teaching is Saint Moses being discerning and saying, yes, I didn't speak, but internally I was angry. I still lost my inner peace. And what you see outwardly is not necessarily what is going on in my mind. And there is a level beyond simply not speaking. Maybe it's good not to lash out and to fight against the racism that he's experiencing. But there's still another level where I have to have inner peace. So anyways, what is clear is that even if you are silent outwardly, you might not necessarily have inner peace. Then we go to the next one. We said some fathers didn't speak because they were worried about saying unprofitable things, committing sin. So another story says, Abba Pomin also said, a man may seem to be silent, but if his heart is condemning others, he is babbling ceaselessly. But there may be another who talks from morning till night, and yet he is truly silent. That is, he says nothing that is not profitable. Again, silence is not necessarily the number of words we are saying, because we can not say them out loud, but we're still thinking the thoughts. And maybe the person who is actually very talkative is saying nice things, and he's helping, he's encouraging others, he's making others feel happy, he's telling jokes, or and even if he does say some wrong things, he might, this person might still be saying thinking less evil thoughts than the person who is remaining quiet. There's a quote by G.K. Chesterton. He wrote a book. It's in a book called The Man Who Was Thursday or something. He describes this character that doesn't stop talking, and at the end, the narrator says, "It is always the humble man who talks too much. The proud man watches himself too closely. I think a lot of people, I feel a lot of people don't really get this. But it is very true. Like, being silent doesn't mean you are humble. It could also mean that you are too self-conscious. You care too much about your reputation or what other people think. You don't want to make a fool out of yourself, or you don't want people not to like you, or you don't want to, look stupid or silly. So you don't want to risk looking bad. So because you're so proud, you don't want to risk looking bad. So you're keeping silent. So it kind of turns that, like, thinking upside our idea of silence upside down. Like we think that being quiet is the humble option, but no, it could be a symptom that you're actually very proud. You're just shy. Being shy is not like a a virtue. It's you gotta get over yourself and put yourself out there and not care about what other people think. So recap. So we said some have gained peace. Silence can give us peace. And then we said silence can avoid the sins, because, like Saint Arsenius said, and the other quote said, we'll avoid sin by not talking. And then practicing silence, not always answering all the questions, can be a form of humility. But we said the opposite. Then we said the opposite. We said silence is not the end goal, like Abarathon did, because you can be silent outwardly like Moses, but be agitated from inside. You can be silent outwardly, not say anything, but in your mind, you are still judging other people around you. You are still you are still thinking evil things, so you're still falling into the sin. And you can be silent, and your silent is not because you are humble. It's because you are too concerned about yourself and you care too much about yourself, and it's a symptom of your pride. We can stop here. We can talk about something kind of unrelated. What do you guys want? Keep going. So, is God silent? What do you guys think? Sometimes. Like when? An obvious one is that famous passage from Isaiah. It's blurry. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that is silent before its shears, he did not open his mouth. This is talking about Christ when he was brought before Pontius Pilate, he was silent, and when he was brought before the high priest, he didn't open his mouth. But yeah, he is silent sometimes. Yes.
I thought about it another way. I thought about it in a way that, like, sometimes God is silent when basically he's been trying to, like, to get us to him, but we're refusing. And sometimes he becomes silent so we can actually realize that basically, like, we're missing out, because he gives us free will. So if he doesn't, sometimes he decides to become silent so we can actually feel that his absence. That's what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I thought about it that way.
Yeah, and some of the Psalms and other parts of scriptures actually complain about this absence, this feeling of God not being present. The psalmist says, to you, Lord, I will cry, do not be silent to me, lest if you are silent to me, I become like those who go down to the pit. He says, this you have been, O Lord, do not keep silence. O Lord, do not be far from me. Or hear my prayer, O Lord, give ear to my cry. Do not be silent at my tears. For I am a stranger with you, a sojourner as my fathers were. Do not keep silence, O God. Do not hold your peace, and do not be still, O God. Do not keep silent, O God of my prayers. It's so common of, feeling this absence of God, this we cannot see God clearly, that some theologians have given it a name. So they give like one of the attributes of God. They say, he's omnipresent, he's all-knowing, he's omnipotent, all that. One of the things that they say, one of the attributes of God is divine hiddenness. And that one is used by atheists to say, if God is so hidden, then why, like, how do you know he exists? But it actually, for others, theologians, they study it and say, why is God hidden? Why doesn't God just come, show up with the cherubim and have a big show, and then we'll believe. But God is often very hidden and silent to us. And I believe the reason, I think, is like Nardine said, is to give us free will. In the epistle to Diognetus, he describes how Christians live and stuff like that. And then he says, this messenger he sent to them, was it then as what might conceive for the purpose of exercising tyranny or of inspiring fear and terror? When he sent Christ, was he trying to exercise tyranny or inspire fear and terror? By no means, but under the influence of clemency and meekness, as a king sends his son, as seeking to persuade, not to compel us, for violence has no place in the character of God. So the writer of this epistle says, one of God's characteristics is that he is not violent. He will never try to force us to believe anything. He is silent because he is like this. He doesn't want to force us. He doesn't want to exercise tyranny. It's out of his humility that he allows us to do whatever we want. And that's why we experience this as silent. So if we were saying those three things, obviously God has perfect peace. God doesn't have, God isn't worried about sinning, but God still oftentimes chooses to remain silent. Not always, because you also have other Bible passages where he says, now it is time for me to speak. I've been silent for long enough, and now it's time for me to speak. But for long periods of time, he is silenced, so we can exercise our free will. Yes.
This is like a question of curiosity. Sometimes, like when I'm watching these atheists, like Christians or all these guys, does it ever cross your mind, like, do these people ever sometimes sit down and ask God, like, if you show me yourself, then I'll believe. Like, if you really come into my life, then I'll believe, like, physically and see. And then, if you ever think that, like, do you think that maybe, like, is there any warrant to thinking that God's not being fair if they've actually asked?
And that's what some of them are arguing exactly. They're saying, if he was there, some of us have asked this and he didn't show up.
So is that like fair on God? Like that's the kind of like I struggle with that.
Yeah, and we could have like a whole other topic about divine hiddenness and why is this a thing? But ultimately it comes down to humility. God, just God lets us be, and we get to pick in a very radical way of like, if we wanted to believe in God, we will find reasons to believe in God. And if we don't want God in our life, we can completely justify not having God in our life. We can completely explain the world without a God. We don't need God for scientific explanation of the world.
I heard something from Pop Shinoda before, that when you pray, God's not silent, but you will hear three answers: yes or no, or wait.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the right time. So I believe that you will receive a message. Not God silent, so whenever it's yes or no or wait no, I think we will receive a message. If it's yes, I think you will feel it. And I believe that something will come by experience and by your experience or practice relation with God. So God's not silent, I think.
Yeah, but I think even with that, I think we can remember that story of Elijah where he was waiting for God, and he was waiting for the wind and the thunder and all that. And at the end, it was a small voice where he heard God. So maybe we can say that God eventually does answer. Maybe he is silent for a bit, but even when he does, even after that period of silence, he will respond, but in a gentle way. He doesn't compel or exercise his tyranny or his power, but it's in a gentle voice of, this is my will. And but yeah, I think there's still like a small period of silence of, what do you want, and what is it? Are you willing to listen to me? Are you willing to?
Yeah, I believe that God will not force us to do something. So it's a freedom, I know.
Mhm.
But I believe that He will give you the answer.
Yeah. And I think that's why those like desert fathers, the more discerning of them wasn't, I have to keep absolute silence and not speak a word. Maybe that's what's required at the beginning. But eventually you do have to talk. And Abba Moses is clearly talking, having conversations with people. But there are certain moments he recognizes when it is that he should keep silence. So it's not an absolute silence. Any other comment? Okay. Yes, Nardine.
Yeah, I just want to say, so like would the conclusion of this be that we can be silent and still sin, and we can also talk and still sin? So it really depends on what we do with our silence and what we do with our talking. So there's
but obviously because those fathers spend so much time trying to strive for silence, they saw, at least in the beginning, it is important to struggle for this absolute silence. I have often regretted the words I've spoken, but I've never regretted my silence. And the quotes about peace, if you do not find peace, why do you speak? So silence is a virtue, but it's not the end goal of it in itself. It's kind of, I think I would compare it to a lot of the other things you do, like fasting, for example. All the fathers would recommend fasting, but it's not whoever eats the least is the winner kind of thing. And or prayer, it's good to pray, and everyone will tell you you should pray, but it's not the person who prays the most hours in a day that's the person who's the best person at praying or whatever. I think silence is the same thing. Silence is a tool, and like all those desert fathers would encourage silence and keeping silence, and at least certain periods of silence, but they would say that don't make it your end goal. It's not, the less words you speak, the better you are.
Oh, we learned in Sunday school
yeah.
Maybe you're talking during the lesson.
Come on, I'm sure that you used to pray all night. If you can say 6-7 hours, you're safe.
I think, yeah. But I think that's a misrepresentation of what it is that they, because even with prayer, they also have, like I showed that story of, there may be one who may seem silent, but his heart is condemning others and babbling ceaselessly. Sorry. But there may be another who talks from morning till night, and he is truly silent, that he says nothing that is profitable. So there's other like analogous stories where, certain fathers are praying for long periods of time or whatever, but they haven't attained to what someone who is, I always remember when Father Maxime once told us, there you can have a great prayer life if you just have 15 minutes a day of quality prayer. So I think the more discerning, it's more subtle than that. It's more nuanced. All right. Johanna, you wanna say that?
So just a quick reminder about next time that we don't have a grad meeting, we have a spiritual day with Father Paul. Paul, thank you. Yeah, so it's from the whole day, but you'll see notification on the grad group, and we'll send it again before the coming Saturday. So we'll have liturgy in the morning, and then we have a whole spiritual day program. You'll see detail on the culture.
Do you need to book or what?
Yes, thank you.
But I tried to go to Unity and sorry,
Apparently it's.
it's done today.
Oh, it's full? Okay, I think
It's
that's.
full of the days.
Yeah.
Like the next-
Yes. I tried yesterday.
Because it's diocese wide as well, right?
Yeah, maybe you can.
It's
check with-
diocese wide.
Yeah.
I'll stop this. You know what? I'll just end it.